probably, of all the military vehicles I've had, this one has given me the most satisfaction. It's given me the most grief as well, mind you, but it's given me the most satisfaction. This is the Mercedes Unimog teleprinter truck. It was used principally as a rebroadcast facility between Frontline and a rebroadcast station. This vehicle itself, it was produced in 1964, although strictly speaking this model was introduced in 1958. So we're talking 1958 technology. I came across it through the German Army surplus disposal agency and picked it up in Germany in about 2000, year 2000, and then went over and drove it back. My son came with me and we drove it back. I think probably we were a bit optimistic about it. We did have a bit of trouble on the way back, but we made it back anyway, more or less caught the ferry. The importance of bringing as many spare parts as possible in one hit. I think that's the secret of getting these projects. Well, stuff's available, it will only be available for a certain amount of time. Even these chairs, you just can't get them. The right fittings for the period, for the fit out for the period, they just don't exist anymore. This was ready for the local bin man to come along, pick it up and take it down the scrapyard. So it was worthless, it was water in it. So I thought there'd be spare parts, or at the very least I might get something which looked nice inside. It was scrap metal basically. What I didn't realise was the quality of the build was so good that with minimum work at that time, bearing in mind that my knowledge was quite limited at that time, I was actually able to get it working initially. The rebuilding is only part of it. That's actually one of the last bits. You should be doing all your research beforehand, finding out about it. The fact that I was able to go over and understand what I was looking at in scrap crates meant that the only way I would know that would have done complete research on the original manuals and specifications. So I was able to look in these boxes and say, oh, that's missing, and then just pick out off the scrap whatever I needed. It was really like that. It wasn't as if everything was neatly boxed up. I literally had to know the specification and what was needed. It took probably a couple of years, the research. Circumstances were such that I could undertake that research. It was part-time, just now and then dipping in, looking at it, and then pulling together a picture, a mental picture of what that final thing would be. Although I never fully appreciated the scale of the challenge, probably. I was a bit surprised, the fact that everything was able to come together. And that actually then spurred on my interest then to keep it. I mean, it's been 18 years now we've had this, 18, 19 years. So it's part of the family, I suppose, in one curious way. But it's a very interesting and absorbing project, and it still holds my interest. One of the issues that drives me on this is that I enjoy the whole hobby. I enjoy the truck. I find the trucks very interesting in terms of what they are. I find the radio interesting, and I find the reenactment to a point, operating to original procedures to try and understand the problems that they experienced in those days and see what they were getting over. I find that quite fascinating. And actually, any one of those, I think if it was only vehicles, I probably wouldn't have that interest. Same with radio, and probably same with reenacting to a large extent. Each one is interesting, but in its own right doesn't hold enough interest for me. And I find that bringing the whole thing together complete, you're truly recreating what was done at that point. That's fascinating. You sort of come into this zone when you sit in here. It's like you're in a time machine. You're basically sitting in an environment that somebody would have been using in the late 1950s, using the same technology as the people in the 1950s, same procedures. I find that quite fascinating. It is almost a time machine. I do want another project. I think I'm at the point where I've almost done everything I want to do with this, and I like the smaller VW-based radio vehicles that were used. Would that be the same end product? Would I get the same enjoyment out of that? So I think that's quite an interesting avenue or rabbit hole to go down, I suppose.